It is our natural human tendency to, even though we know better, assume that people all think as we do. If you like freedom, if you think the government has overstepped, you might think, hey, that's what the general population wants. They all realize it, right? And yet, what I've been telling you for years is, no, the average person in your country wants your taxes to be higher. They want everyone to have fewer freedoms. They want to go down more of the path that the Western world is going. And today we've got evidence of that from Canada. I'm going to share it with you. What I've been telling you is that in reality, your compatriots want socialism. And so according to the Financial Post in Canada, 4 in 10 Canadians prefer socialism, but not higher taxes to pay for it. I'm going to read the article in a minute. But one thing I've always thought was kind of sort of unique about the United States compared to, let's say, Europe, was that people in the United States increasingly like the idea of socialism. They want the government to provide more services, but US taxes, while very high, on the middle class, they're not really as high as they would be again in many countries in Europe. I mean, you look at European countries, you get kicked up into the 40% income tax bracket at a relatively low amount of earnings. You don't get to, I mean, there's not even a 40% bracket in the US. If you're self-employed, you're still paying well over 40%. But if you have a job making $75,000 a year, you're not going to pay as much as you would in Europe. And people are used to those lower taxes. And so they say, well, I don't want to pay more taxes, but you should pay more taxes. And that's why you see when Obama ran, it was $250,000. No one under that's going to pay more taxes because that's the politically acceptable number. Now you look at the impact of their inflation. Now Joe Biden says, okay, $400,000, nobody pays anymore. That's what 12 years of inflation does to you. And that number will just keep going up because the average person says, hey, as long as I'm not paying more, who cares? Well, now that trend apparently is creeping up to Canada, where people do pay a little bit higher taxes in Canada than they would in the United States. And they're saying, hey, bring on more socialism, just don't make me pay for it. I give many European countries some credit. I have friends in Norway, and they're like, yeah, everyone's happy to chip in. It's very unified. We all get together and sing Kumbaya. Everyone's happy to pay. But what you're seeing in North America, and I think a trend that perhaps may be exported, is they just want you to pay while they get the largesse. Here's the article by Jason Clemens and Stephen Globerman, which says, according to a new poll, 42%, more than 4 out of 10, Canadians believe socialism is the ideal economic system. Now, obviously there is no perfect capitalist system in the world. There's no entirely free market system in the world. Look at what happens now with bank failures in the US. The government just steps in and said, oh, we told you one thing. Okay, now all right, we'll help you out. We'll do another. There's no perfect capitalism out there. But Canadians are saying that pure socialism is the ideal economic system. That's slightly lower than in the UK, where it's 43%, basically the same, and higher than both the United States, 31%, and Australia, 40%. So you've got perhaps not pluralities, but very sizable minorities of people in a number of Western countries that think socialism is the ideal economic system. Go back decade by decade for the last 50 to 100 years and see what those numbers were. I can promise you they're getting higher every decade. More people in the Western world want socialism because they've lost sight of what made them successful in the first place. I constantly turn on the news and I hear people bemoaning that productivity, for example, among workers in the United States has grown at faster than wages have grown. And I've surmised it's because productivity in many other countries around the world where labor is cheaper has also become much more efficient. It's also gone up. And so companies are taking advantage of an open market all around the world. It's not just that being Canadian, being Australian, being British means you get a ticket to Easy Street anymore. Maybe Easier Street, but not Easy Street anymore. And that's upsetting people. And what are they doing? They're doing what I've always told you they would. And they're saying, let's go to socialism. Some of them, including what you're seeing in some European countries, they're going to communism is what they think is best. Younger Canadians, and this is why you're seeing it goes up decade by decade, but younger Canadian support for socialism presumably is due to, in part, their lack of real-world experience with genuine socialism. This is an opinion piece. And the misery it imposed. One thing I always find interesting, by the way, is people point to Venezuela and they're like, no, they're doing it wrong. That's not what we're talking. That's not real socialism. They just didn't know what to do. All right, but your politicians, there's so much. You got a real bunch of winners in your country. They won't do it wrong, right? Leave it to Justin. He'll do a great job. The polling data bear that out. That younger people, which they say have less real-world experience, want socialism. Support from socialism drops from 50% among Canadians 18 to 24 to 38% among Canadians over 55. Not a huge delta, by the way. I mean, still 38% over 55 years old. But who's influencing policy? I remember going to the Wynn in Las Vegas many years ago and saying, why are we, this is such a sophisticated place, why are we playing this music? And one of the dealers said, well, you see that 55-year-old guy? Look at who he's with. He needs the 28-year-old girl to come here so that he can come with her. The 18 to 24-year-olds, the 24 to 30-year-olds, I mean, they're the ones setting the policy. We adjust as a society in some ways to what do these people, what's cool? What's the trend? And that's only going to become more of a trend long term, where 50%, 18 to 24, say, hey, yeah, socialism, that's our thing. Don't make us pay more for it. You pay for it. Just give us the free stuff. And by the way, you're seeing that in some areas of, if you have a business, in hiring. I don't like dealing with big corporations, and I imagine working for a giant corporation or trying to get a job at a giant corporation, that must be hell. So people have my sympathies. I'm sure these corporations are not treating them very well when they're trying to get a job or when they work there. But what we're seeing, in my opinion, is more and more people saying, I want more time off, we want 4-day work weeks, let me work whenever I want, but it never works in your favor as the employer. It's coming to the point where it's like, listen, just send me the paycheck and I'll be at home. And that's kind of what you're seeing borne out in this survey. 50% of folks say, you pay, and I want the socialism. There's also a question, the article continues, of what is the 21st century supporters actually mean by socialism. Unlike other polls on the subject, this one, conducted by Leger in the fall of 2022, included definitions of socialism. Only 25% of Canadians polled define socialism as the government taking control of companies and industries, which is the classic definition. They don't even know the definition. So this is your public school system at work, by the way. What do Canadians mean by socialism? The overwhelming majority of those polled define socialism as the government providing more services. Give me some stuff. 57% define it as the government providing a guaranteed minimum income. 57%. Now, we've talked about how fewer than 20% of people in many countries have any kind of financial literacy, have even been to any kind of financial literacy education. So you'll understand when 57% of people say, the government doesn't need to take over businesses, but just send me a check every month. It literally is send me a check every month. Now, if you're running a business, how's that going to work? Because the utopian view is, well, if we send everybody $1,200, they'll all do what they're passionate about. And some of them will go out and they'll paint amazing murals and we'll find the next Michelangelo. And some of them will go out and their passion will be, and I'm sure there'll be some of that. And there'll also be some people sitting at home scratching their tuchus with Cheeto dust on their belly, watching television. Because hey, you can do that when you get free money paid for by you. Now, how's your workforce going to be, by the way? And this speaks to the point where you're kind of perpetuating the cycle. You're going to say, I run a business. Your workers can be anywhere. People are getting a guaranteed check. They have all kinds of free services paid for by your tax dollars. Are you going to want to hire people in that country with an entitlement mindset who charge top dollar when you can go somewhere where the people are like, yeah, we still believe in hard work? I was talking to someone yesterday. She hires people in 20 different countries. And she said, we don't hire in almost any of these Western countries. Now, we are at Nomad Capitalist for some positions saying, hey, it is better. There's more people in the West. But we're also saying we're not going to entirely hire in the West just because that's where I'm from, or that's because where our customers are. We're going to hire where we're treated best. And so I think you're going to have as a business a very hard time. If your business isn't remote, if you can't be working anywhere, you're going to have a harder time finding people with this attitude. And it's only going to get worse, as we're seeing, again, each generation just gets worse and worse. But that's only going to make the cycle continue, where we're going to hear, oh, but look at this, they're sending their jobs overseas and wages in Canada are going to get suppressed, wages in the West are going to get suppressed, while people in other countries make more money. Heaven forbid, I know, right? These people just thought being born in Canada should be a ticket of privilege for the rest of their life, that everyone else should make less money so they can enjoy the largesse. It really is a very selfish system. But the article continues, the government providing more services is certainly consistent with the policies and aspirations of the federal government. Well, of course, good news. The government wants socialism too. The Trudeau government has increased transfers to the provinces to support healthcare, post-secondary education, social welfare. Again, how great is this education when people don't even know what socialism is? But they know they want more of it. It has also introduced a new transfer to eligible families with children and created 2 new federal programs to collaborate with the provinces. Okay, blah, 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 more free stuff, free stuff. stuff, free stuff, free stuff. And so the article goes on and on. You can read this on the Financial Post. Oh, it ends with the problem with this basically is even after hiking taxes, the government doesn't have enough revenue to pay for this stuff. So government debt's going up and economic growth is slowing. And they're talking about how the total national debt went from 1.1 trillion to 1.9 trillion. If you're from the US, those numbers might seem like something from like the Johnson administration, but Canada's a little smaller, so $1.9 trillion for them is still a lot of money. That is under the current federal government, 1.1 trillion to 1.9 trillion, like almost double, unless you went to public school. So even hiking taxes on you, the evil capitalist, is not enough to pay for all the free stuff people want. And so, what can you do? Number one, if you have a business, focus on making it as international as possible. I think that's just good advice in general. Even if you're in Canada, you say, okay, we also sell to the US. That's not enough. You will avoid recessions. You will open up new market opportunities. If you say, how can I sell what I'm doing to people all around the world? You will also allow yourself then to hire people in different parts of the world to where you don't need to deal with people who come in with a surly attitude demanding a gravy train. I'm not saying everyone does that, and I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush, but certainly that's how a lot of employers feel. It is getting hard to find people. Of course, it's your fault, you're not paying them enough. Well, again, when everything is free and we just send you a check, yeah, it's probably hard to pay enough. So you can make your business more international. You can get some international folks in the workforce. We found that, if you have technical roles, whether it's, search engine optimization for your website or an accounting role, that's easier to find than something that's more creative. So you could start with that. But the longer term plan is if you're running a business or if you're a wealthy person, you're still gonna have to pay more taxes to pay for all this. And sentiment is going to be against you. Look at all the protests that you've seen in different countries, whether it's France, they don't want to have to wait 2 more years to retire. You've seen even going back to the Occupy Wall Street days in the US, there is sentiment against wealthy people. You're going to pay more taxes, they're going to get free stuff, and they're still going to hate you. And so you can live in your wealthy enclave perhaps and avoid some of that and have your own little ecosystem. And yet we've seen protests in the US, they march through the wealthy enclaves because their goal is to make you miserable, their goal is to take your money, and they think they're perfectly entitled to do that. That is the trend this is talking about. And so the ultimate thing would be, where do I have a second residence? Where do I have a second passport? And what's my plan that when things get bad enough, which quite frankly, your national debt's almost doubled. People are already calling for socialism. That might be bad enough. But I'm gonna have another place to go that's in a more tax-friendly climate where people have more of a eat what you kill mentality. And I'm gonna have that ready to go, that I can move there. And if I'm Canadian, I can go through a tax non-residence process in my country and say, I'm out, stop taxing me. Unlike the United States, Canadians, at least yet, don't pay tax on their worldwide income merely because they're citizens. You pay it because you live in Canada. And so if you no longer live in Canada and you go through the proper steps, you can stop paying tax in Canada. Now, obviously, if you have a Canadian business that does business there, that may be taxable in Canada. And so these are all the things that Nomad Capitalist helps people figure out is how do the business, how does everything in your ecosystem successfully move offshore when you've had enough of paying through the nose and it never being enough and people asking for more. It says right here in the article, it's going to slow economic growth. Debt is going to. And I would imagine just giving everyone a check is probably going to slow economic growth too. If you look at the fastest growing economies in the world, I can promise you, because I've been there, people are working. People aren't, lounging around on a Tuesday afternoon in India or in Indonesia. People are getting stuff done. And so if you'd like to take advantage of those policies, you don't have to move to India, you don't have to move to Indonesia. But you can find tax-friendly places. There are some in Europe, there are some in the Caribbean, there's some in Asia, there's some all over the world. You want to have a residence permit at the minimum. You probably want to have a second passport because eventually they're going to start wanting to tax Canadians no matter where they live, and you're going to want to have an exit plan. You want those things set up now so that either you can leave now or you can leave on a dime when they start implementing more of the tax hikes they want. This is the direction it's going. You can be the frog in the boiling pot of water and think it's not, I'm just, hey, this feels comfortable to me. Every decade it gets worse. And so you want to be prepared.